By the time I reach the point of this poem, I will have died 3 times. 1. The first time a poem woke me up at 3 o'clock in the morning, it was like waking up from a bad dream. I couldn't sleep until I wrote it down, until I cast it out like a ghost as if my hand were possessed. Under the witching hour's spell, poetry is such a subtle enchantress. She's an obsession. When I hadn't slept in weeks, it was like my spirit departing my body. That perfect line was a cloud 9 I was riding toward. I was convinced I could reach it, but forgot that poets who try to touch heaven before their time are silenced too. When poetry becomes your life, you hardly realize the zombie you're becoming. Performers are so good at pretending, masking the rot in stage makeup and poets' clothing. We forget to notice when the fire leaves their eyes, when the heat leaves their bellies, when we bleed out everything on stage. We aren't performing anymore. We are decaying. All that's left are cold-bodied marionettes that dance for your snaps and applause when the music stops. We are left with nothing, and our poetry doesn't gurney our skeletons off the stage. 3. I can't tell you how many times I've killed myself in a poem. I can't tell you how many people I've sacrificed. So many poets have buried themselves alive, dwelled too long in the deep end, and ended up drowning. I can't tell you how many times I've killed myself. Suicide rates are the highest among poets, the highest of any genre, because poetry has a way of forcing our heads underwater without showing us how to resurface. Poetry has a way of sending us overboard. It left us hollow boats sinking fast and didn't care to fix the leaks. I've died 3 times in this piece already, but I still haven't told you how to live. Truth is, I can't ask my favorite poets how they survived, because their own poetry killed them. Sylvia Plath returned to the final stanza of the last poem she ever wrote before suffocating herself in an oven and slipping wet towels beneath the kitchen door to spare her children. Anne Sexton, a year before locking herself in her garage and starting her car's engine, predicted she would release her last manuscript after her death. Sarah Teasdale overdosed on depressants when she could not overcome her chronic pneumonia. Her last collection, Strange Victory, followed her passing. But Captain, my Captain, what victory is there, never knowing how many lives you could have saved? Poetry could raise millions from the grave. Instead, it has the blood of millions on its hands. Sometimes our poetry abandons ship on us. Sometimes this altar becomes a morgue. I share stages with cadavers. Poets who asphyxiate on their own blood. I read their writing, but it's all post-mortem. Their autopsies were the first time they opened up to someone. A moment so intimate shouldn't be shared against the surgical table. Remember, a poem is never worth your sacrifice. We weren't supposed to write our own eulogies. We aren't supposed to recite our death sentence. Sometimes we need to let our poetry die ahead of us before the poets who need to hear this poem the most are no longer living.